Hi, I am Nia, and in 2022, my parents didn't just break my heart, they shattered it with a champagne bottle at my brother's birthday, all because I refused to surrender the deed to my $600,000 0-cents apartment, their latest scheme to strip me bare while the crowd watched in stunned silence. But that wasn't the worst part. They'd already erased me from our family photos. They tried to sell my home without telling me, and when I fought back, they made a video calling me the traitor. I never thought justice would look like an empty house or a folded napkin left behind. But maybe that's what happens when silence speaks louder than loyalty. Before we begin, what time is it where you are, and have you ever had to choose peas over people who share your blood? Tell me below, because this story doesn't end the way you think. It was a warm Sunday evening in Portland, the kind where twilight stretches long and golden across driveways and blooming rhododendrons. I pulled up to my parents' house just as the valet opened the driver's door. My Mazda sedan, scrubbed clean inside and out, looked wildly out of place next to the Jaguars and Volvos lining the cul-de-sac. I stepped out, brushing off invisible dust from my simple navy dress. No designer label, no statement jewelry, just clean lines and a tiny pearl stud I'd had since college. I clutched a neatly wrapped box, a monogrammed pen set for Theo, and walked toward the front porch, where laughter spilled out like champagne. My stomach turned, not just nerves, but a gnawing dread I couldn't shake, like I was walking into a trap dressed as a celebration. The house had been transformed. String lights zigzagged across the yard, live jazz hummed in the background, and the aroma of cedar-planked trout wafted through the air. My brother Theo, the oldest and brightest star in the Harper galaxy, was turning 45. The celebration was bigger than most weddings I'd been to. I overheard a guest whisper, "Clara's outdone herself. Must have cost a fortune." And another replied, "All for Theo, of course, the golden child." My grip tightened on the gift bag, their words stinging like salt in a wound. Inside, a young man in a tight vest and fitted slacks stood at a podium with a guest list. He smiled politely. "Name?" "Nia Harper," I said, adjusting the gift bag in my hand. He scanned the sheet, then paused. His finger trailed down a column. "You're listed as +1 under the Harper family block." I blinked. "Sorry, what?" He turned the paper around, showing me. There it was, a carefully printed chart. Harper family followed by individual names. Theo, Clara, Victor, Ivy, even cousin Lila and her 3 kids. Then at the bottom in smaller font, +1 guest of family. I forced a smile. "Guess I'm the lucky +1. He looked unsure. "Would you like a different tag? I can handwrite it." "It's fine," I said quickly. "Really?" I pinned the generic guest badge onto my dress right over my heart. It pulled slightly at the fabric. "+1, I muttered under my breath, the words bitter. As if I'm a stranger they dragged along. I moved through the house, nodding hellos, ignored just enough to remember I was out of orbit here. The ballroom doors were wide open. Crystal chandeliers dangled overhead like floating planets, casting diamonds of light across tables covered in silk. I scanned the place cards. My seat was near the back, table 20. I walked toward it slowly, heels tapping softly against marble. Table 20 was tucked behind a thick pillar right next to the kitchen door, where servers came and went with trays clinking and the occasional shout of, "Hot plate!" My place setting was slightly off. The silverware crooked, the napkin folded into a limp swan drooped forward like it had given up halfway through the evening. I reached to adjust it, pausing as the paper-thin wing fluttered under the air from the swinging kitchen door. A server bumped the table, not noticing me, and muttered, "Out of the way, guest." I flinched, the dismissal cutting deeper than it should have. I sat down and exhaled. From my vantage point, I could barely see the head table, but I could hear everything: laughter, toasts, the pop of another champagne bottle. Theo was being hailed from every direction. "Our golden boy," someone shouted. A woman in stilettos leaned over to kiss his cheek. Clara stood beside him, beaming with the practiced grace of a political hostess. "This is our son," she repeated over and over to different circles of guests. "He just made regional VP in 5 years." Isn't that something? I caught Theo's eye for a split second. He looked away, but not before I saw a flicker of guilt, quickly buried under his charming smile. No one noticed me. Victor, my father, did glance over once. He caught my eye across the crowd, offered a slow nod, not a greeting, just acknowledgement that I existed, and turned back to speak with his business partner. I picked up the water glass and sipped slowly, letting the chill anchor me. My hand brushed against the napkin again. That sad little swan, crumpled and lonely on fine china. Maybe they just forgot to list me properly. Maybe someone mixed up the chart. Or maybe, just maybe, I was never meant to stand out here. "You're invisible here, Nia," I whispered to myself, the realization sinking like a stone. A server leaned over to clear the seat beside me. It had remained empty all night. "That one taken?" she asked. I smiled. "No, it's all yours." She gave me a pitying look, as if she knew I'd been relegated to the fringes, and I hated how much it stung. The clinking of forks on glasses started and the lights dimmed slightly as the spotlight illuminated the stage. A microphone screeched softly before settling. A voice deep familiar spoke into the system. "And now, a few words from someone very special to us. Please welcome Nia Harper." I froze. My name echoed through the speakers, but not the way I hoped. The applause was still trailing off when I stood up, hesitant, confused. I hadn't prepared anything. I didn't know why I was being called forward. As I walked toward the small stage, heels clicking in rhythm with my racing pulse, Clara gave me a smile I couldn't read. It was too polished to be warm. There was a microphone stand in the center and a spotlight just slightly too bright. I shaded my eyes, scanning the room for some kind of context. Theo gave me a nod from the main table, Ivy's hand resting perfectly posed on his. Victor sat with one arm draped behind Clara, grinning like he was watching a show he already knew the ending to. "What's this about, Clara?" I whispered as I passed her, but she only patted my arm, her smile tightening like a warning. I reached the mic, waiting for someone to hand me a card, a script, anything. Nothing. Then the screen behind me lit up. A video montage started rolling. First, a picture of Theo in a Little League uniform holding a bat bigger than his arms. Then a middle school science fair. Him pointing to a cardboard volcano. High school graduation. College internship. A shot of him shaking hands with the mayor. Then blueprints. His first architecture project. Narration began. My mother's voice. From the very beginning, Theo was destined for greatness. He was the light in every room, our foundation, our pride. Then Victor chimed in. "We always knew he had that spark, the kind of brilliance you don't teach. It's born in you." My jaw tightened. I watched the video silently, hands clasped in front of me, smiling because the alternative would be giving them a reason to say I was sensitive. Not once did they mention the $100,000 0-cents loan I wired Theo during his startup years. The weekends I helped him rebuild client decks when his software crashed. The night I slept on the floor of his half-built showroom so the carpet installer wouldn't bail. There was no trace of me in this history they had edited for the crowd. The screen flashed a photo of Theo signing a major contract, and I remembered the late-night call when he begged me to cover his overdue rent so he could close that deal. "You're a lifesaver, Nia," he'd said. Now, I was nothing. The video ended with a splash of gold cursive, a legacy in the making. Applause. People clapped politely, some even enthusiastically. I nodded faintly and turned back toward the mic. Clara rose from her seat, clapping as she approached. "And now," she said brightly, "a few words from the ever-thoughtful little sister." I blinked. So that's what this was. A staged speech. A performance they hadn't rehearsed me for. I glanced down at my dress, suddenly self-conscious. My hands were sweating. I leaned into the mic. "It's a beautiful night," I began. "And Theo, you know you've always had a gift for making the room light up around you." My voice wavered, and I caught Ivy whispering to Theo, "She'd better not ruin this." "That's when she did it," Clara interrupted me, laughing like we were all in on the same joke. "Oh, honey, tell them," Wouldn't it be the perfect gift if you handed them the apartment key tonight? The room stilled. It wasn't the kind of silence that descends naturally. It was the air being sucked out of a room all at once. Someone in the back coughed. A phone camera clicked. My throat dried. I looked at her, trying to figure out if she'd lost her mind or if this was some sort of test. "What?" I asked quietly, not into the mic, just to her. She kept smiling. "You know, the place in Salem, that lovely 2-bedroom apartment you've got, you're always traveling for work, and Ivy and Theo are newlyweds. It just makes sense." Victor chimed in from his seat, voice booming. "Come on, Nia, it's just a formality. You don't need all that space. It's not like you're using the guest room." "You've got no family to fill it," he added, his words slicing through the crowd's murmurs, and I felt the sting of every eye on me. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a maneuver, one designed to leave no room for a no without making me look ungrateful. The crowd wasn't sure how to respond. Eyes darted, heads turned. Theo looked down at his plate. Ivy's lips tightened. She didn't look surprised. "This wasn't agreed on," I said into the mic, my voice suddenly sharper than I expected. "You can't just demand my home in front of everyone," I added, my tone rising, the crowd shifting uncomfortably. The room reacted. A few gasps, some of sympathy, others of embarrassment. Clara waved a hand, still smiling like this was an improv act. "Don't be dramatic, sweetie. It's just a gesture, a symbol of love." "You're making a scene, Nia," she hissed under her breath, her smile never faltering. "Don't humiliate us." I could feel my chest tightening. Every cell in my body screamed for me to defend myself, to list every sacrifice, every loan, every family bill I'd covered when Theo's firm hit a dry spell. But I didn't. Instead, I stared at my mother, at the way her face was stretched into a mask of charm, at the way her eyes watched me, not with affection, but calculation. This was planned, down to the exact moment. "You think you can bully me into this?" I said softly, just loud enough for her to hear, my voice trembling with rage. She didn't blink. The audience fidgeted. Someone whispered, "That's bold." A woman nearby muttered to her friend, "She's not going to say no in front of everyone, right?" I set the mic down gently. It made a soft thud. My hand trembled slightly as I smoothed my skirt. And then I smiled, quiet, contained, the kind of smile that says, "I see you and I will remember everything." I stepped off the stage, not knowing that the worst was still waiting behind the dessert table. I hadn't made it 3 steps off the stage when I spotted Victor waiting by the dessert table, arms stiff at his sides, his jaw tight. He wasn't looking at the cake or the guests. He was staring at me, and that was never a good sign. Clara stood just behind him, a champagne flute in hand, whispering something under her breath. From her expression, it wasn't concern, it was disgust. "She just embarrassed us," she muttered to him, thinking I wouldn't hear, or maybe hoping I would. "She's always been selfish," she added, her voice dripping with venom, loud enough to turn heads nearby. I slowed, not because I was afraid, but because something in the air told me I was about to be cornered. I scanned for a safe face. "Ivy?" She looked away. "Theo." He was sipping something dark and pretending I didn't exist. The white marble floor beneath my heels was pristine, the kind of polished that makes your own reflection feel like a stranger. "Theo, say something," I called out, my voice cracking, but he only shook his head, as if I were the one causing trouble. Victor stepped forward and grabbed the neck of the champagne bottle on the table. I assumed he was reaching for a refill until he turned fast and without a word swung it sideways. The base caught me just above my temple. A crack, then white. Not a full blackout, more like a camera flash that never turned off. I staggered, vision swimming. There was a pressure, a warmth crawling down the side of my face and then gasps. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God." Another voice. "Did he just?" Phones raised. Not one hand reached out. Blood hit the marble like red ink on snow. "You ungrateful brat," Clara spat, not even lowering her voice. "We brought you into our home, gave you everything. You think you're better than us? She continued, stepping closer, her eyes wild. You'll regret this, Nia. I couldn't even process it. My body was moving before my mind caught up. I bent slightly, pressing my palm to the side of my head. The pain was sharp, yes, but the humiliation scorched. A few guests stepped back. No one stepped forward. Micah, my cousin on my dad's side, the one who always smelled like motor oil, shouted, "Someone call the police!" His voice cracked, but even he didn't move toward me. "Victor, you've gone too far," he added, but his words were hollow, swallowed by the crowd's stunned silence. I straightened slowly, trying not to show the shake in my knees. My dress, pale blue, was already streaked with red. The marble shimmered beneath me, dizzying. "Is she okay?" a woman whispered near the fruit table. "She's being dramatic, right?" "No," someone else answered flatly. "That man hit her. I got it on video." "She deserved it," another voice muttered, and I felt the words like a second blow. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I walked through the stunned crowd, past Theo, who looked down at his plate like it was suddenly the most fascinating thing in the world. Ivy touched his arm, but she didn't get up. "You're okay with this, Theo?" I said as I passed, my voice low but cutting. He didn't answer, his silence louder than any shout. Outside, the night was quiet. No one followed. I called an Uber with trembling fingers. Blood had crusted along my jawline by the time the driver pulled up. He looked nervous. "You all right, ma'am?" "Hospital," I said simply. At the ER, the fluorescent lights made everything feel colder. I filled out my own form, smearing ink with the edge of my bandage. The nurse was gentle, asking questions in a voice like she was used to women showing up alone. "Anyone coming to stay with you?" I shook my head. "No, just me." She gave a nod that said she understood more than she let on. "You're not the first." I leaned back on the stiff cot as she pressed gauze to my head. The ceiling tiles were the color of toothpaste, scrubbed and sterile. "You're stronger than you know," she said softly, her words a small anchor in the chaos. That's when it hit me. Not the pain, not the embarrassment, but the clarity. That was the last time I showed up for any of them. By the time I got back to Elise's place that night, everything ached. My scalp throbbed with each heartbeat, the dull pulse reminding me of how fast things had unraveled. She'd left the guest room light on with a soft towel laid out beside the bed and a warm mug of chamomile tea on the dresser. I didn't touch it. I just sank into the sheets, shoes still on, and closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to shut out the memory of glass clinking and judgmental eyes. I replayed Clara's words, "You'll regret this," and wondered if she meant the apartment or daring to exist at all. Morning came too soon, filtered through linen curtains and the chirping of a neighbor's sprinkler system sputtering to life. I blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling, momentarily forgetting where I was. Then my head gave a sharp throb and everything came rushing back. I reached for my phone. Dozens of notifications lit up the screen. None were from family, not even Theo, not even to pretend concern. There were messages from old co-workers who had seen a clip online. Yes, someone had uploaded the moment. A shaky recording, a gasp from the crowd, my body stumbling sideways with red blossoming at my temple. I pressed delete again and again, but my hands kept shaking. A text from a former colleague read, "Nia, I saw the video. Are you okay? They're monsters." I didn't reply, but the word monsters echoed in my head. I tried to find some normalcy and routine, showered, brushed my teeth slowly, wincing each time I tilted my head. Then I reached into my purse to grab my apartment key, just a little mental exercise, make sure I was still grounded, still in control. But something was off. My wallet was there, my phone, lip balm, receipts, even the half-eaten protein bar I forgot about last week. But not the spare apartment key, the one I always kept clipped to the side pocket. I emptied the bag onto the bed piece by piece. Nothing. That's when it hit me. A week ago, after a family dinner in Beaverton, Victor had scooped up my bag by mistake, or so he said. "Thought it was your mother's," he'd shrugged as he handed it back with a sheepish grin. I hadn't thought twice about it until now. Now I remembered his grin wasn't sheepish. It was smug. Like he'd already won a game I didn't know we were playing. The vibration of an incoming call startled me. Unknown number, I answered, more out of instinct than curiosity. Hi, Miss Nia. This is Tara from Urban Realty. Just confirming our 3 p.m. appointment for the walkthrough today at your apartment. We'll meet at the entrance, unless you'd prefer to use the lockbox. My stomach dropped. I didn't schedule anything, I said, my voice unsteady. Oh, Taylor sounded confused, flipping through something on her end. It's scheduled under your name. A Mr. Victor Harper was listed as the co-signer, but the listing account was under your property title. I couldn't breathe. I never listed my apartment. This is a mistake, I added, my voice rising. Or worse, it's theft. There was a pause. Would you like to cancel the showing then? I hung up. For a moment, all I could do was sit at the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, phone in one hand, my other hand gripping the bedsheet like it might keep me from slipping into a free fall. They didn't just try to humiliate me. They were trying to erase me piece by piece. I whispered to myself, they want everything, my home, my name, my existence. I opened my laptop and stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like it was daring me to act. Then I opened a blank email to julia.martin@lawfirmco.com. Subject, urgent. Hi, Julia. We met briefly last fall at the networking brunch. I'm hoping you remember me. I think my parents are trying to steal my home. I don't have proof yet, but I just received a call from a realtor about a walkthrough I never scheduled. They have a key I didn't authorize. Can we talk? Nia Harper. I hit send, then grabbed my coat. By noon, I was standing outside my apartment in Eugene with a locksmith, the sun beating down hard on the back of my neck. The man in coveralls nodded toward the doorknob. Someone's been in and out. The scratches are fresh, like they didn't know the exact placement of the key. Can you change the locks? I asked. Absolutely, he replied. Want to add a deadbolt too? I nodded. As he got to work, I leaned against the hallway wall, eyes fixed on the fine scratches near the handle. Not a break-in, no signs of brute force, just access. Familiar, casual access, the kind that made your skin crawl. They were in my home, I said aloud, the words tasting like betrayal. The locksmith glanced at me but said nothing, his silence a small mercy. I didn't sleep much that night. The locksmith had left around 8, and I sat on the couch in silence, the scent of metal and lubricant still lingering in the air. I reheated leftover soup, barely touched it, then tossed and turned for hours. When morning finally came, my phone buzzed softly on the counter beside my keys. A new email from Clara Harper. Subject, let's talk Nia. We love you. This has gone far enough. Please come by the house this afternoon. No guests, just us. Let's fix this. Mom. I stared at it longer than I should have. It wasn't rage that bubbled up. It was something quieter, warmer, even a sliver of that desperate hope I hadn't fully killed off yet, that maybe, just maybe, they wanted to talk like family. But Clara's words from the party, "You'll regret this," rang louder, and I wondered if this was another trap. By 2:15, I was pulling into their driveway. The front lawn looked as it always did, meticulous with solar lights lining the flower beds and a porch swing that hadn't creaked in years, but the air felt off, too rehearsed. Clara opened the door before I knocked, arms already outstretched, like she'd sensed my hesitation. "Nia, baby," she said, pulling me into a gentle hug that felt 3D too cold. "Thank you for coming." "We've missed you," she added, her voice syrupy, but her eyes were cold, scanning me like I was prey. I stepped inside. The living room had been staged. That's the only word for it. Fresh orchids on the coffee table, lemon tea set out with my favorite shortbread cookies, framed photos I hadn't seen in years. Me and Theo at the lake when we were kids, that blurry one of me at my high school debate finals. Even the lighting was perfect, soft, inviting. Theo sat on the armrest of the couch, hands folded, lips pressed in a straight line. He looked up, but didn't speak. Ivy wasn't there. "Just us," Clara said again, gesturing to the plush chair I used to sit in when we opened Christmas presents. "We wanted to make things right. We're family, Nia," she said, her tone too sweet. "Families forgive." I didn't sit. Victor emerged from the hallway carrying a manila envelope. He gave me a look I couldn't read, somewhere between calm and smug. "We've been thinking," he said, "about how to keep things fair and clear. We don't want more misunderstandings, so we drafted something." He offered the envelope like it was a peace offering. "It's for your own good," he said, his voice low, almost threatening. "What is it?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. "Just something to help define family boundaries," he replied smoothly. "You know, so no one gets hurt again." I opened it slowly. The paper inside was thick, formal, legal. The words "deed transfer agreement" glared back at me in bold. The rest was cloaked in neutral phrasing: asset clarification, internal arrangement, mutual understanding. My chest tightened. I flipped to the signature line. "You're asking me to sign away the apartment," Clara smiled, folding her hands in her lap. "It's just paperwork, sweetheart. A formality. You don't even need all that space alone. You're not starting a family," she added, her words sharp, meant to wound. "Why hold on to it?" "You're not even reading it," Victor added. "Don't you trust us?" "We've always looked out for you," he said, leaning forward, his eyes narrowing. "Or have you forgotten?" The room suddenly felt smaller, the air denser. I closed the folder carefully and set it back on the coffee table just to the left of the tea tray. "You set this up like a reconciliation," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "The flowers, the cookies, the old photos, like you were inviting me home." Clara tilted her head. "We are." "Don't throw this away, Nia," she said, her voice rising. "You'll be alone if you do." "No," I said. "You're inviting me to hand over the last piece of myself you don't already control." Victor's mouth twitched. "That's not what this is." "You're being stubborn," he snapped. "You owe us." I took a slow step back, surveying the room one more time. This wasn't peace. This was theater. I turned to the door. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "Not now, not ever. This is theft with orchids on the side." Theo finally spoke. "It's just property, Nia. Why can't you just do this for us?" he added, his voice pleading but edged with resentment. "You always have to make things difficult." I looked over my shoulder at him. "It's not about property. It's about what you think I'm worth. You've taken enough from me, Theo," I said, my voice breaking. "When does it stop?" No one followed me out. I walked straight to my car, got in, and shut the door before the first tear could slip down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. I just let it fall as I dialed Julia's number. She answered on the second ring. "Nia, I'm ready to go all in," I said. "File everything." "They've gone too far," I added, my voice steady despite the tears. "I want them to feel this." The next morning, I didn't wake to sunlight or the scent of coffee. I woke to silence, thick and full-bodied. The kind of silence that doesn't settle. It presses. I made myself a cup of black tea and sat by the kitchen window, letting it steep longer than usual. The condensation on the glass blurred the view outside, like it was trying to spare me the sharp outlines of a world that had shifted overnight. At 9:32 a.m., I parked outside Julia's office. Downtown was already humming, but inside the building it was cold and still. Julia met me with a nod and a folder already in hand. "I reviewed everything last night," she said. "They've left a mess, but here's the good news. You still hold the deed to the house they're living in." I blinked. "You sure?" She flipped to the second page, tapping the signature line with her pen. "You bought it in 2013, remember? Foreclosure rescue. They never transferred it back. They've been living there on assumption and memory." I leaned back in the chair, letting the information settle like warm oil. "I gave them a lifeline," I murmured. "They turned it into a noose." "They thought I'd never find out," I added, my voice hard. "They underestimated me." She nodded slowly, offering me a choice without words. I took the pen. Back at home, I didn't feel triumph, just direction. I wasn't driven by rage. I had already given them enough of my life through raw emotion. This was surgical, quiet, final. Julia filed the notice to vacate within hours. We didn't notify them. There were no dramatic warnings, no shouting matches in parking lots, no staged interventions with extended family clapping like a live audience. This wasn't TV. This was real life. And real life hits back in envelopes. I imagined Clara's face when the sheriff knocked, her perfect mask cracking, and it felt like the first breath I'd taken in years. 3 days later, the sheriff delivered the eviction order. I didn't see it happen in person, but Theo, ever the online documentarian of life's milestones, captured it on a grainy home security camera and uploaded it to our extended family group chat like a cry for help. The footage showed Victor opening the front door in a wrinkled bathrobe, holding a half piece of toast, blinking at the man in uniform like he'd woken in someone else's life. Clara was behind him, mouth slightly open, frozen mid-sip from a porcelain mug. The officer handed them a sealed envelope and spoke too softly for the mic to catch, but the reaction needed no audio. Her body stiffened. Victor snatched the paper, skimmed it, and slapped it against the wall. The video cut off just before she shouted something at the officer. Something I wouldn't have heard even if it had played. A follow-up message from Theo read, "How could you do this to us, Nia?" I didn't reply, but his words burned, a final attempt to guilt me into submission. I watched it once, then once more, then closed the app. That night I sat in my apartment, lights off, sipping chamomile with honey, my phone face down, the screen black. No music, no Netflix, just quiet. The world outside continued moving. Cars rushed past, a dog barked in the distance, and someone played jazz on a balcony a block away. But inside, time felt still. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I didn't toast the air. I just sat there and breathed. Sometimes justice doesn't look like standing over someone. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to stand next to them ever again. My phone buzzed once. I almost ignored it. Then I turned it over, a message from Ivy. Only one line. "They've done worse than you know." Ivy's message stared back at me from the dim screen, glowing like a confession under a spotlight. I tapped the image attached, a dusty family photo album, its leather binding fraying at the edges. She had taken a picture of it spread open across her lap. Page after page, and not a single photo of me. No childhood birthdays, no graduation, not even one of those awkward Christmas snapshots with the ugly sweaters Mom insisted on. It was like someone had surgically removed me from the timeline. Her text followed seconds later. "They've been erasing you for years, even from memory. I found this hidden in their attic," she added. "I'm so sorry, Nia. I should have spoken up sooner." I blinked once, twice, then whispered out loud to no one. So, I wasn't just imagining it. And somehow that quiet validation struck harder than all the blows before. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there staring at the image, letting the cold truth sink into the soft tissue of memory. It wasn't just overlooked. I was deliberately erased, rewritten out of my own family's narrative. I finally typed, "Thank you for showing me what I always felt but couldn't prove." "I don't blame you," I added, though part of me wondered why she'd stayed silent so long. The next morning, I woke up with a strange stillness, the kind you feel right before a storm, not outside, but within. I didn't know why I checked social media. Maybe I already sensed the next hit coming. Clara had posted a video. At first, I didn't even recognize the voice in it, but it was mine. A clipped version of my toast at Theo's party, not the whole speech, just the part where my voice cracked, where I said, "This wasn't agreed on." It was spliced between images of Theo smiling, with balloons, of me standing stiff and awkward. The caption, "We raised her with love, we never expected betrayal," spilled beneath it like spilled wine. Family matters, broken hearts, daughter of stranger. I didn't click the comments, but the preview said enough. Ungrateful. We need the whole story. Some kids are just never satisfied. One comment caught my eye. She attacked her own family. Disgraceful. My breath caught, the lie twisting like a knife. They weren't just rewriting the past anymore, they were building a whole new fiction with me cast as villain. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought I'd be shaking again. Instead, I opened my Dropbox account. I uploaded everything. Dated wire transfers from my account to theirs, the original apartment deed, email exchanges about the loan. I gave Theo even a saved voicemail from Mom asking if I could just cover the mortgage this one time. No commentary, no hashtags, no call to arms, just a folder named Truth if you care to see it. Then I shut the laptop. I didn't need to watch it go viral or not. That wasn't the point. The point was, I didn't owe them silence anymore. I whispered to the empty room. Let them choke on the truth. I made tea, sat in the kitchen with the blinds half drawn, let the sun warm the back of my hand as I cupped the mug, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I had to brace for the next blow. That afternoon, I went through an old storage bin I hadn't touched in years. Tucked beneath a faded t-shirt from college was my own photo album, one I'd made in high school. Long before I knew they'd someday erase me, I flipped through it slowly. There I was, crooked teeth, band concert uniform, that hideous floral prom dress I'd begged Mom not to let me wear. Every picture was proof I had existed, that I belonged. If not to them, then at least to myself. And in the middle of the book, I found something I forgot I'd even kept. A sticky note in Dad's handwriting from when I aced my first college paper. Nia, knew you had it in you. Proud of you, kid. Dad? I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I closed the album, slid it back into the bin, and said to the empty kitchen, You did love me once, but that doesn't excuse who you are now. You don't get to define me anymore. I added, the words a quiet vow to myself. That evening, I received a message from a name I hadn't seen in years. My Uncle Silas, Mom's older brother. His text read simply, Saw the folder. About time someone told the truth. If you need a witness, I'm here. They tried to shut me out too, he added. You're not alone, kid. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe the glass house didn't shatter all at once. Maybe it was breaking pane by pane, with each person who finally chose to look past the stories and see what was real. The next morning, I drove down the familiar road without music, just the hum of the tires and the occasional street light flickering past the windshield. I didn't rush. There was nothing left to race toward and nothing left to avoid. By the time I pulled up to the house, the moving truck was already there, parked diagonally across the driveway, its back door wide open, waiting. The realtor stood by the gate, clipboard in hand, her tone brisk and professional as she nodded to the workers hauling boxes from the garage. They weren't my parents' boxes. Those had been taken or abandoned days ago when the eviction order was served. What remained were leftovers, objects stripped of meaning. I stepped out of my car and shut the door gently. I didn't need force anymore. That part of me had quieted. As I approached the front steps, the air felt heavier than it should have. The weight of a place that once held laughter and casserole pans, Sunday crossword puzzles, and back-to-school photos taped to the fridge. Now it held only the echo of absence. Inside, the walls were bare. No photos, no paintings, not even the dust left behind by picture frames. The light filtering through the blinds landed flat against the empty floor like it was too tired to glow. I walked through slowly. No tour needed. I knew every inch. The scratch on the kitchen cabinet Dad had sworn he'd fix. The corner of the living room where I used to build forts out of pillows. The chipped tile in the hallway bathroom Mom blamed on contractor error. But I knew. Theo had dropped a hairdryer. It was all still here, and yet it wasn't. Then I saw it on the kitchen counter. A letter with my name on it. It wasn't handwritten, just my name printed in a stiff, indifferent font like a utility bill or a jury summons. I opened it with a flat palm, not expecting kindness. I wasn't wrong. This was never your home anyway. That was it. No signature, no attempt at apology, just a parting shot on a piece of standard printer paper. I folded it once, then again, and tucked it into my coat pocket without reading it a second time. I didn't flinch. "You're wrong," I whispered to the empty room. "It was mine until you stole it." As I turned to leave, something made me pause at the hallway cabinet. A small wooden door, the kind no one ever really used, tucked beneath the stairs. I hesitated, then opened it. A single shoebox sat inside, unmarked, covered in a fine layer of dust. I brought it to the kitchen island and lifted the lid slowly. Inside was a photograph. I was 8. Hair in uneven pigtails, missing a front tooth, holding a science trophy taller than my arms could wrap around. I'd forgotten about that day. I had won first place for a homemade volcano that actually erupted with foam and vinegar. No one else was in the photo. I remember standing on stage alone. Behind that picture, folded carefully like a pressed flower, was one of my swan-shaped napkins. It wasn't a replica. It was one of mine from that dinner party, the one they'd left crooked on the table by the kitchen door, the same one I had straightened with shaking hands, trying to feel like I belonged. I didn't know what it meant that they kept it. Maybe nothing. Maybe guilt? Maybe someone had meant to throw it out and just forgot? But it was still here, and it was mine. I closed the lid and held it to my chest for a moment. Just one. Then I stepped outside and handed it to the realtor. "This stays with me." She nodded without asking. Sometimes people know when a thing carries more than dust. As I walked to my car, I didn't look back. Not at the porch, not at the roof I once helped patch, not even at the door they used to stand in every Thanksgiving, waving goodbye with empty hands. I didn't need to. I paused by my car, the shoebox under my arm, and whispered, "This is mine, not yours." That night, back in my apartment, the lights were off. I sat in the kitchen with the box beside me, the swan napkin in my lap, my fingers smoothing its edges. My phone buzzed. A message from Julia. "The sale's final, funds wired." I stared at the words for a long time, not because I didn't believe them, but because part of me didn't remember what freedom felt like. Then I looked at the swan. The same folds, the same edges, the same paper. I whispered into the quiet. They gave me back everything by trying to take it all. The morning light streamed through my apartment windows, softer than it had been in years, but not radiant. I set the folded swan napkin gently at the center of the dining table, the same one I had found in that forgotten cabinet. That soft creased linen felt like a whisper from an older version of myself, a quiet promise kept, not by them, but by me. The room around me was still. My kitchen smelled of cinnamon and fresh polish, but the air carried a weight I couldn't shake. I wasn't waiting on a call, an apology, or permission to feel peace. The silence didn't press on me anymore. It wrapped around me like a shawl, but it was threadbare, worn by the scars I still carried. Then the envelope came, tucked in a pile of mail. It was cream-colored and thick, my name handwritten in cursive across the front. I recognized Ivy's handwriting before I even opened it. Inside, a baby shower invitation, formal, tasteful, and then at the bottom, a quick scrawl. "I'm sorry I didn't know how far they went. You deserved better. Ivy." No flourish, no excuses, just acknowledgement. It lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying, but only slightly. I stared at the card for a long while, not out of indecision, just reflection. A part of me wanted to tear it up. Another part, a wiser, more weathered part, knew the cost of burning bridges for smoke that wouldn't warm me anyway. So instead I wrote a check to the local women's shelter. In the memo line I wrote, "In honor of a new beginning." And I didn't attend the shower. I kept the invitation, though, tucked in a drawer, not as forgiveness, but as a reminder that even broken families leave echoes. Some cycles don't need to end with screaming. Some stories don't require fire. Silence, when chosen, is its own revolution. That evening, I cooked dinner. Just a simple pasta dish with garlic and thyme. I set 2 plates, not out of habit but intention. Zara arrived 15 minutes later, her arms full, a bottle of wine in one and a tiny orchid in the other. "You need more green in here," she said, setting it by the window like she'd always lived here. We ate slowly, like people who had nothing to prove to time. The conversation wandered from work to books to a show she swore I'd love, and I swore I'd never start. At some point I looked at the swan on my table. It wasn't fancy, its edges were soft now, the crease not as crisp as the ones I used to fold for family parties, trying to impress people who never truly saw me. But this one sat alone, and it was enough. I thought about the girl I used to be, hiding in corners at events, smiling too wide when ignored, folding napkins like origami shields. And I thought about the woman I had become, not cold, not cruel, just complete, or as complete as someone could be with wounds that hadn't fully healed. I turned to Zara, refilled our glasses, and raised mine slightly. "To building our own tables," I said. She clinked her glass to mine. "And never begging for a seat again. You're stronger than they'll ever know," she added, her eyes soft but fierce, and I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed it yet. That night, I didn't think about what they lost. I thought about what I reclaimed. Not just property or dignity, but presence, identity, a quiet kind of power no eviction or lie could ever touch again. And that, I decided, was worth more than any inheritance they ever withheld. But as I lay in bed, the swan napkin still on the table, I felt a pang, not of regret, but of grief for the family I'd once believed in. Freedom came at a cost, and I'd paid it in full. I wasn't whole, not yet, but I was mine, and that was a start. Sometimes the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from the people who raised us. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about reclaiming your voice, your space, and your peace, even when it leaves you bruised. Have you ever had to walk away from family to protect your soul? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. If you believe in healing through truth and quiet strength, subscribe for more stories like this.